Hey everyone, are you a new note investor who's looking to learn the basics without spending a ton of money or time online or even a weekend away from your family to attend a conference? Well, we have a great beginners video series for you. It's 20 different topics, each video being less than 15 minutes. This means less fluff and direct to the content information. To learn more, check it out at www.jkpholdings slash beginner series. Again, that's www.jkpholdings slash beginner series to learn more.
Hey everybody, Dave Putz here from JKP Holdings alongside me, Nathan Turner. Happy Friday, bud. How are you?
Very good, very good.
Good. So I think last time we got on, you were buying some CFDs and some notes. You put some bid offers in. How are those working out for you right now?
My CFD bids fell through. I was able to pick up. I actually just funded on 2 mortgages today, and then I went in contract on another one yesterday.
Okay.
And then I've got some additional bids out. So
Nice.
we'll see how those go.
Yeah, we put a bunch of offers. We've gotten recently a bunch of small tapes and some other mixed use tapes we've gotten recently from the different sources, some common sources.
Yeah.
And you never know, right? We try not to veer away from making offers because all it is making offers.
Yeah.
The process is good.
And that's that's interesting. One of the key differences between real estate and then notes is if you're making an offer, it's with the intention to close. It's not just a shotgun approach. You just throw out a bunch of dummy offers. No. This is for real.
And I think for my partner, when we first got involved, he was like, "What do you mean you just make indicative offers? What's that mean?"
Right.
And he couldn't understand the fact that you do all the work after it.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
those who are listening out there, don't worry about the fact that making offers, right? They're indicative of everything else. Just as long as you got your calculator working with that data tape with those numbers in mind, you should be okay.
So here's actually real quick. The 2 that I just closed on that I just funded today, it was 2 that I bid on. It looked like one of them had fallen out for a while. So we were trying to kind of figure out something else to replace it. And then the seller came back to me and said, "Hey, that one in Texas is back up if you're still interested." I said, "Absolutely. Yes, I want it."
Yeah.
And I talked to him later and he said, so the issue was, it was with somebody who was just taking their time. Due diligence was just dragging. And they just said, "You know what, just give it to Nathan." So and I think my guess, and I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that I'm actually paying a little bit less. But I'm for real and I'm going to close and they know that. And so I get the deal instead of the other guy. It makes a difference. It makes a difference.
It's amazing for people to understand that this networking space for us is all about this whole bidding process is all about networking. It's not about just the numbers. You may get accepted just because of your communication with them, calling them up, explaining what's going to happen, set the time frame of when you think you'll close by. Hey, listen, I'm going to need 10 days. Don't tell them 5 when you may need 10.
Right.
And set a time frame up and just be honest. Say, listen, I screwed up. Listen, I understand we sell off. I just got tied up. So I totally agree with that thought process.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're this is not a mess around kind of thing. We're not going through title. There's not a giant process. It's your word. You obviously sign a contract, but your word, and you make good on your word, and you're going to get a lot more business.
So, it's awesome because one of the pieces in this puzzle we're going to be talking about today, which is awesome. And I think the most underrated education is inside the collateral, understanding it and going through the process of it. A lot of the quote unquote teachers don't go into it and they stop there, right? And some reasons are because there's a whole lot to understand.
Yeah.
Another time, it's just they don't know, right?
Yeah.
And there's things that we just don't learn, and we need that expertise. But then there's another layer where we can't know because of circumstances we don't have the experience in.
Right.
So why don't you introduce Casey and explain, get his background?
Yeah, I wanted to tell you this story because this is just recent.
Yeah.
This is just this last week and this week. So last week, I'm selling a house. We took back a property in foreclosure in Tennessee, or sorry, in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, and we're selling the property. We're supposed to close this last week, and the closing attorney says, well, the problem is there in the initial mortgage, for some reason, it was a HUD mortgage, and for some reason they wrote it twice, and we're not sure why or what the reason was. And maybe Casey has some insight onto why they would do that. I have no idea. One of them, and it wasn't a second mortgage, it was just the same mortgage written twice, and both of them were recorded. So one of them had been passed down the chain appropriately, and it was fine, and that's the one we foreclosed on. And I think the thinking was with the attorney is that once we foreclose, it'll foreclose on both. When in fact, not exactly. Maybe, but not exactly. That other one is still out there. So what ended up happening is now I'm stuck. I need this other mortgage released before I can do anything or foreclose on that one, which I certainly don't want to do. That'll take much too much time and energy and money and all the rest. So we're looking for a release from HUD, from the government agency, and I'm going, oh my gosh. So last week, you'll remember, I put it on our Facebook group. Anybody know anybody from HUD that can sign a release for me?
Yeah.
Crickets from that side. And then I go over to Casey Wilson and said, do you guys have a contact at HUD that can sign a release? And their vice president, Mark, he writes back, yep, yes. that's the magic. So this one, I don't want to say it didn't have anything to do with the collateral, but it was just an assumption that everybody made, myself included, that that would be okay. And of course it's not. But in fact, just this morning, I got an update email that the document's been submitted to HUD, return labels all printed and everything else. So within the coming days, we'll have that vital
and invaluable. Document. It's invaluable, right?
Yeah.
It's just being able to process and move forward with that title being clean.
Yeah, that document is worth several $1,000s to me, and so maybe I shouldn't say that to Casey.
Trust me, I know. I know very well.
So Casey and I first met at an IMN conference a couple of years ago, and I'm not even sure you'd remember, Casey, and I believe it was you and Mark.
Right.
And it was an interesting meeting because same as Dave, I'd heard about Casey Wilson. If you need documents tracked down, things like that, they're the best ones. Check them out. And so we met then, and I thought it was kind of an interesting meeting because I felt like we were both kind of checking each other out and just making sure that we would fit well. And I was saying, so can you really do this? Because I've had other document chasing companies, whatever you call that, and moderate success, and I'm thinking, well, here goes another one, but no, head and shoulders above the rest. Casey Wilson is definitely my go-to whenever I need something tracked down. So that's my brief introduction for Casey. But we'd love to hear how did you get into this? What do you guys do? Let us know.
Okay, basically, I got into the mortgage industry 40 years ago, and I started in a mortgage company, and I did all the origination side and delivered to the secondary market. And then I worked for an organization that was taken over by the federal government during the RTC days. I worked with the federal government and interfaced with Wall Street. And during my career with the RTC, Wall Street became very familiar with me because I was delivering the most product to them for the mortgage-backed securities that were created. And from there, the RTC wanted me to move to Washington, D.C., and I was not interested in that. So I opened up my own business based upon Wall Street saying, hey, we need you to help us get all this product to market. You really understand the mechanisms of getting product to market. And I've never not been busy since. And I'm fortunate because I come from a background where my father owned his own business, and his position was always, if you know technically your business, you will be successful. And if you manage your business based upon your assets of your staff, et cetera, you will be successful. We have always been relatively successful based upon the size that we're in, and we've acquired now a great staff and are able to take more and more business on.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I tell my kids the same thing. I don't care what you do, just become an expert in that thing.
Yeah. And the technical side.
Yes.
And as you have said, you really need to understand. And I have a very different philosophy, because as you were saying, I interviewed you, you felt like, to a certain extent.
Yes.
I've been doing this long enough that I don't want to become an adversary with somebody. I want to be a partner with somebody to make them successful. We will give you the information that you need to determine whether or not the risk we see is acceptable to you. We will not tell you this is a bad risk. We'll just say, we want you to understand what you have as far as your collateral. And more importantly, we've been through the foreclosure process so many times. We know basically what you're going to find based upon your collateral in this instance. Now, it's not saying that you won't be able to foreclose, but you need to understand this could be an obstacle that you're going to need to overcome. Right. It's not a slam dunk like you found.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And Nico asked the question, how did I not know about that? It actually did not show up, and I have to double check to be 100% sure. I don't think it showed up in our title report, which is odd, and it should have, but.
Yeah, I would be curious to see whether or not the attorney doing the foreclosure considered it a re-recording of the same mortgage and approached it from that angle. The attorney can make that assumption, but if you do not have concurrence with the title company, you're going to have an issue. And that's where I think we make sure in our relationship that everybody involved in the final conclusion is involved. Your attorney drew a conclusion, but he needed, in my opinion, should have cross-checked with the title company saying, okay, when we finish foreclosure, we need to get everything cleared off. Are we going to be in a position to have everything cleared off? I'm not foreclosing in a second lien position. I'm foreclosing under the assumption I'm a first, and everything else will come off.
Right. Right. Yeah. And this one has been a bit of a thorn in my side, because it's with COVID and everything else, it's just been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed. And so we finally get to the closing table, and then this comes up, and I'm going, oh, are you kidding me?
Right.
So Casey, let's back up for a second, right? We have some experienced investors here. We have some beginners, right?
Right.
Can you share the overview of what your company can provide to both the beginner as well as that advanced investor? What are some of the services you guys offer?
We will give you a review of the collateral documents that you deliver to us, using the documents that you've delivered to us, either in original or in images or copies. We will then evaluate those documents and tell you whether or not we feel you have what we would consider to be a complete set of documents enabling you to gain ownership of two things, which are very important to you. You want to gain ownership of the note, which determines your ability to collect, but equally as important, you want to gain ownership of the mortgage, which secures your borrowing, because you're going to foreclose should you have a problem against your mortgage. So we would tell you whether or not you have a complete chain moving that into your name without any problem. If you have problems, we can advise you where the problem is, and then we can work together to go back to your seller, or in conjunction with everybody, determine how we want to resolve the issues that come up.
And what's the most common issues that do come up? The investors
We come up with the ownership transfers are not complete. That's the biggest problem most people face, is that you're buying something assuming that the seller has the ability to transfer the asset to you. And the seller may feel he has the ability to transfer the asset to you, but he doesn't have a complete chain of ownership to him.
So like
or
a missing assignment or a launch or both.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
we've
it
run
can be-
situations.
Right. And they're not fatal, but you need to, in my opinion, you want to know up front so that you don't get to a situation where all of a sudden you need to do something and you're scrambling. I want all of our clients on the offense rather than on the defense.
We've run into situations where the, you know, assignment or the launch was then made out to blank, and then the seller, you know, A wrote the blank, and then B, C, and D started creating their own assignments, and they should have left it blank, and they don't. And the other ones have been recorded in the county records as, you know, recorded assignment, recorded and whatnot. And we've run into that problem where now we're in a situation where we have to somehow figure out a way to get the previous original lender to write the assignment to the buyer B, if we're E, and complete that chain, right?
Absolutely.
Because you can foreclose on a blank assignment. We can do that in certain states. However, if it's blank from A to B, but then B creates something and record it, then you have your problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I think, where, again, we want everyone to see what they have, and then you can make your own decision as to how you want to move forward with that. We also find that we bring value added when you're selling your product. If you understand your hiccups, you can be prepared ahead of time, not to take a bigger haircut than you want to.
Yep.
You want to be always, in my opinion, on the offense, not defending your product.
Right. So I mean,
Or defending your ownership as the owner of the collateral.
Yeah. And how many times have you seen that, Dave, where it's missing an assignment or an launch or something? I mean, it's way more common than it should be, but it happens all the time.
And sometimes that company's out of business.
Yes.
You know, where HUD's is hard to get a hold of, but you may find a company, a note investor who bought it, sold it, and now is out of the business. And that company has been folded.
Yeah.
What do you do then? How do you get that assignment recorded when the business no longer exists?
Amoresco is one of those big ones that if you've got stuff stuck in Amoresco, it's a very difficult predicament to be in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically, LLCs hold over someone that can sign off old documents that are previous done, but there are companies out there that you're going to be in really tough shape to be able to foreclose on it, which is we all want to be in a spot where we can legally foreclose on these documents and secure the house back, right? And you review mods and all stuff, and you're not doing the legal side of it. We're not worried about statute of limitations. This is just to make sure that you have ownership of the collateral, that everything that was originally made is now transferred you successfully and in order.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think this is where a company like Casey Wilson, who's been around long enough to have those connections, is so vital, because you can, like I said, I've had varying success with other people trying to track down collateral for me. But if they don't have the connection, they don't have the connection.
Yeah.
And it's the same as if I was going back to HUD to say, hey, I'm you know, Ernest Inc. Who's Ernest Inc. And they want this document signed, versus Casey Wilson that they've dealt with hundreds of times before, and they say, oh yeah, okay, another one of those, yeah, fine, and they'll go ahead and do it. So
And the large companies are just like that, you know, HUD, and then there's the massive size companies where you can't get a hold of the person who needs a signed document, and it just, or they don't exist anymore. So no one having that network, that connection like Casey has, is invaluable, because he's been doing it so long. He's had those connections for years.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
So what are the biggest struggles you see investors have that, you know, that, or myths out there that maybe is not true?
Oh, I would say that the biggest handicap or myth most investors find is that they think it's going to be very easy to do this, and they don't truly understand the cash requirements that are necessary when you own loans and when you go through the process of collection, or you go through the processes of various different things that have to be done in order to get to the end goal.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I see the majority. And I think you have to, as you have mentioned, you need to be able to understand who you are doing business with.
Yeah.
And more importantly, you need to understand what that person you're engaging is supposed to do for you, not tell you what to do. And I believe very strongly that you cannot just turn a collection situation over to someone and expect them to do it. You, as that owner of the collateral and owner of the debt, need to instruct the attorney or instruct the collection agent as to where you see yourself and what you're expecting them to do, so that as you monitor the progress to the end, you're driving the transaction in a positive way versus a defensive way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So Daniel Singer gave you a shout out that you're the best team possible for any job he needs. So thank you, Daniel, for reaching out, man. We had Mark on last week, and he asked the question: do you ever deal with CFDs or strictly institutional paper?
We can deal with whatever you want us to deal with, provided that we're both on the same page as to what you're referencing as what you're speaking of. Because I've had people say they bought unsecured collateral or they're buying debt. And I'm like, no, wait a minute. You're buying an obligation to pay, but what does that obligation entail? I mean, if you just have a stream off of a servicing system and no documentation, you're going to have a very difficult time going after somebody to collect a debt.
Yeah, I had a situation like that where I actually bought some loans from, what's the name now? It'll come to me after we're done the call, I'm sure. But it's a mortgage company that was very big in the run up to the meltdown.
Yep.
And then afterwards, I was presented these loans, but there was zero collateral, zero
Oh my God.
servicing history, like nothing. All the what? Well, we still own these mortgages. Well, sort of.
Was it first or seconds?
First.
Oh, okay.
First.
And I think the other thing that's interesting that I have found in the industry is the word charge off. If you're buying charge offs, what a charge off to one company is not necessarily a charge off, meaning the debt was forgiven. It just meant to that company it was not worth pursuing any further.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have value in charge offs if you understand what that is and how to pursue a course of action against them. That's the other thing that we find. We have to be very careful that we use the same terminology in describing something.
Right. Yeah, a case of one man's trash is another man's treasure. To the bank, maybe that's a charge off because it's really not worth anything. But to me, that's exactly what I'm looking for. That's perfect. So not exactly a charge off.
So let's define what that means. Casey, why don't you define what your understanding of charge off means? Because we have some people that are not sure what that means in general. And they ain't even seen that term before sometimes.
Okay, what if I'm a lender and I have 100 loans, and those 100 loans are paying every month, and then all of a sudden I wind up with 20 of them that are not paying, and I go in and I investigate and I think, I'm looking at my collateral, it's my house, which is the security, and it's not really where I thought it was. This borrower has not been keeping the property up. I look at the fact that the borrower has gone too long without paying. Then I look at the cost to do the collection to get the property back. And I determine in my business, I don't want to spend that much money to collect the debt. So I consider it a charge off, and I move it to the status of charged off, where we're not going to do any more activity. The smaller investors may say, that's great. I have a house, I have a borrower, I have, these types of things. I can take that and I can look at it and I can possibly restructure it. I can possibly do different things to it so that I will gain a cash flow, which is what I'm looking for. Or I may be able to work with a borrower to get them out so that I wind up with the property, which is what I'd rather do. I'd rather have the property, eliminate the borrower, and go on. So it depends upon what strategies you have as to how you would pursue that non-paying asset. Many times charge-off is an asset that isn't paying, and whoever owns it at that time doesn't want to invest anymore.
Right. So essentially, it's a charge-off. So therefore, they're going to sell it as a non-performing loan because to them, it's not worth anything. Whereas that is my business, is I buy these non-performing loans, and that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Well,
it's
and
really
it's even one step further. If you're regulated and you have these, it's affecting your cash flow.
Sure.
So you have to put more reserves against it. So that's why non-performers are a real problem for regulated enterprises, because they've got to offset the cash.
So for those who are looking at to figure what it is, means that it's an accounting thing that when banks have certain amount of bad debt, they have to sell off or move it to a different platform's duration. So they're charging off that debt and it's no longer on their books counting against the cash reserve they need to have. Right?
Correct.
Awesome. So we do have some questions here. I'm just going to feed them to Nathan. He'll hit them up.
Yeah. Somebody was saying they had some issues with their collateral from Countrywide. Sri Gan was saying that.
Uh-huh.
Are you?
Oh, yeah.
That's a dumb question, right?
Countrywide is Bank of America. Bank of America is a big maze to go through.
Right. But then
you can help them out.
You've got the contacts there and the
Absolutely.
people there.
Again, we will look at what they have and we will assist them to determine whether or not we can help them. I'm not going to string anybody along. We're going to give you a very clear cut. We can either help you or this is an issue and this is how you need to pursue it, depending upon what you have.
And do you typically charge them for that evaluation? I'm sure you do.
Yes, we look at the collateral and then we'll give you our recommendations and then you can go from there. Absolutely.
If you're unable to assist with getting that documentation, which I don't believe is possible, but if that run into a scenario where that company is no longer available, is there any way you can help them figure out what they could possibly do?
Absolutely, because see, I firmly believe that you need to be up front, depending upon what you are attempting to do with collateral that isn't in your name. For an example, I have a loan, $100,000 against a piece of property. It's been through the two owners and I bought it from the third owner. In this example, we're using Countrywide. Countrywide never moved the loan forward. So at the county recorder, it still sits in Countrywide. If I'm going to foreclose against that piece of property and I'm missing that link from Countrywide to the next party, I need to make sure as the owner of that property that when I work with my law firm that's going to do my foreclosure, we deal with that right up front in the court. We deal with that right up front with the attorney, and we determine how we're going to approach that, because we cannot be left with a piece of property that is just in limbo because of a situation of a document. We can demonstrate that the loan has been moved forward. We have the note, we have various different things that will demonstrate the property or the actual debt has been moved, but we then go to the title company and say, what are we going to do in conjunction with all of us to move it forward? Again, becoming proactive versus allowing that to stall us and not go anywhere.
Okay.
So we have a new investor ask this question, and this I think is a very common question I've gotten. And for a new investor, should they be sending this collateral file to you before they buy it, during the loan process due diligence, or only after they buy the notes?
That would depend upon how the client feels they want and how much of the evaluation they want to know. I don't buy blind, so I would say it would be worth their while and their dollars spent for us to look at it and give them back an evaluation. In many cases, the information we give them may allow them to adjust their price that will more than compensate for the small fee we charge to evaluate.
Nathan, have you ever bought a loan before reviewing the collateral? I don't think
No.
I have. So for those newbies,
Well,
you're
but
not
wait a
doing
minute.
it. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me interrupt you there. I will sell you 100 loans today, and you will buy them if I have no collateral, because you'll price it accordingly.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's the situation. You may buy loans without collateral, but you're going to price it accordingly. And you
Right.
and I would have had a conversation saying, okay, what do you think you're buying? And how much of this collateral do you think we can gather by virtue of the resources? So we have a game plan to do it. That's the
Yeah.
value added we would give to you. And you may not get the 100 assets that you're buying all documented, but if you got 70 of them documented and foreclosed upon and gone in your course of operation, you will have made a very, very smart investment.
Right.
I'm going to go
There
back to
again,
this
it's
buying.
understanding your risk ahead of time.
Right.
I'm going to go back to the whole buying process in a second. I'm just asking one question. I know it's going to come up. What's a typical time frame for a lost assignment or a situation where you need to collect? How long does it typically take to get that collateral?
It depends upon where we're having to go. I can't say that it's an immediate situation. It's like anything else. If we have contacts that will respond immediately, it's great. Sometimes we get caught in the maze. It's a very strong matter of follow-up. It's diligence on the follow-up. We don't send out and then wait. We send out and follow.
How about then for the document review? What's the turnaround time for a document review, collateral review?
Well, we can usually get them done in 48 hours, provided that you're not dumping a huge amount. But if somebody says, we have them, we can get it done very quickly for you on a one-off, so that we establish, more importantly, a relationship for you to understand what we're doing.
Right.
We can't have you
So-
constantly say, oh, I got one today or I got 10 today, and stop everything and do it.
Right.
If you're a client that's looking for some help immediately, we would stop and say, okay, we can get this done for you.
And those are listening, most of the time you're sending them a zip drive. You're not sending them hard collateral. When you get to the higher levels, you're going to send it through a letter and whatnot. But most investors here are going to be getting a zip drive when they make the offer. And when they get the accepted offer, they'll get the collateral sent to them in a zip drive fashion. And that zip drive fashion, you can send to Casey Wilson and let him evaluate and look through the collateral file. You're more than likely not going to get the hard collateral file. You just, until you get the higher level stuff.
Yeah.
Correct. And what we do is that we will, in our review process, we will indicate to you what we have and in what form we have it. We have an image of a recorded mortgage. We have an image of this. We have an image of that. And then what we want to do is confirm when the original collateral were to be delivered, we sync up and make sure that we get the original of what we have in images, or we may get originals in the file that were not imaged that will fix some of our fixes. That's why we don't always start immediately until we get that physical collateral file on the curative work.
Okay. So there's a question here. Can notes be boarded with the service company with incomplete collateral? That's a good question.
Could you read the question again?
It says, can notes be boarded with a service company with incomplete collateral?
I think if we're referring to if you're gonna buy a note and you're gonna load it with load it into a servicer, will they accept a note without collateral? And not that it's Casey Wilson's. This is what Casey Wilson is not the servicer. He's just reviewing the collateral. So not that he would know the answer, but generally speaking, you need to make sure that if you're gonna buy a note with no collateral, that the servicer and company doesn't know what to do with it. They don't know what the pay history is like. Right? Unless the previous seller has collateral of their servicer showing pay history, then that will transfer over. But the servicer doesn't need to see the mortgage and note and things like that.
Well, let me interrupt you there for just one quick question, because that brings up what we see many times as well.
Mhm.
The note was done 10 years ago, and the note was at 8%. And when you're looking at this payment stream and you're buying a 6% note,
True.
you're wondering, wait a minute, how did we go from 8 to 6?
Right.
Our indication would be to you, it was modified. However, we're going to stress to you, we need to see the confirmation of the modification in some form, because you're going to wind up in trouble if you're collecting 6 and you don't have anything to support the 6.
Right.
And all you've got is the original note. That's why many servicers are apprehensive about loading something blindly. And then you run into this problem, not immediately, but then when you try to do something, you're caught off guard, because we tell all of our clients, do not start any collection activity of any kind unless you totally understand what you've got to support your action, because you will find there are many attorneys out there right now that represent borrowers that all they're doing is stalling with no intent of ever paying you, but staying in your property forever.
Yeah.
Well said. So yes, you're right. If more than likely you're going to need your collateral before you go to servicer. So if you're getting a paper without collateral, I would even wait on that kind of stuff, because the servicer wants to see what the agreement is so they can make sure the P&I matches and do like that. So
absolutely,
yes, I concur with you on that. I've never loaded a loan without collateral, so it was definitely a question I've not been in before. So, so I think, some of the biggest things too is with collateral is the understanding that it isn't a lot, right? There isn't many things inside of a collateral file, but what are some of the key things that these new investors could do to just skim before they send it off to you? What are some of the items there's the typical 5, right? So could you just share with them what you're looking for initially to make sure those common files are there?
Yes. What we would like to see is that we would want to see the document that describes the borrowing of the money. Normally that is referred to as a note. So the note describes the manner in which the borrower is to repay the debt. Now, we also would like to see that note has moved from the originator of the loan to the party you're buying from, as if you were endorsing the back of a check, either on the back of the note or in attachments that move it from party to party to party. Then we want to make sure that the note that is referring to a piece of property that is being used as the collateral for the borrowing has that document to secure the collateral, which is a mortgage or a deed of trust, depending upon where you are. Now, that deed of trust should refer to that note that you are borrowing, you're buying, and it should refer to the same note that you're buying. And then again, you would want to see that note or that deed of trust or mortgage has moved from the originator to the party from whom you're buying. Then, as we've already discussed in prior discussions today, the title policy is essential to you, because the title policy will ensure that when the loan was made, the title company is ensuring you are either in a first, if it's a first lien, or you're in a second position. So that in the case that Nathan had, should Nathan have had a title policy that referred to the mortgage that he had, and he had as listed as a first, the obligation of removing that prior to him mortgage would be upon the title company that issued the title policy for the mortgage that he foreclosed upon. If the mortgage is after the one that Nathan bought, then Nathan has an issue, not with the title company, but he's got a problem with removing it. So that's why we look to the title company and the title policy, because that will help you should something have not happened correctly in the closing of the mortgage and note that you're buying.
Do you typically request the investor to send you their O&E report so that you can compare what is recorded?
Again, I think if you're not doing that, you'll get surprises.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we may have a collateral file that has a chain in it going from A to B, B to C, and C to D, but you may find that, oh, B sold it twice. So there's two from B to two different people, and they never
Yes.
rescinded one. So
Yeah.
now we have a conflict. Or again, I think you want to know whether or not the taxes are current, whether or not you've got some, again, glaring issues that are going to come up.
Mhm.
Not maybe the day you buy the loan, but down the line, should something happen. Everything is always fine on day number one. Everything is always fine for the first 30 days.
Mhm.
It's after the net, when you expect your first payment and it doesn't come, that you've got some problems. Or all of a sudden, borrowers begin to realize the loans have been sold and they're going to test you as an individual.
Yeah, and most of the time we send for our collateral review, we send the file as well as our O&E. It helps you kind of figure out what was going on in the county records, but also
Correct.
helps us to know what's going on. from our side.
Absolutely. Because they many times they do not match 100%.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome.
It's-
So
it-
I've had some horror stories. I'm sure Nathan's had some horror stories,
Yeah.
you know, with this stuff. For me, I can't see anyone not going through this process. I'm amazed when people don't have their collateral reviewed. I understand if it's simple collateral file, they can do it themselves. But for any person that's new, pay the money. It's not expensive to have that collateral review, and you get an exception report telling you what files need to be fixed. And if you're clean, it's great. And like you said before, you can then take this and pass it on to a buyer and resell that note with this exception report saying it's clean.
Well, and one other thing I think you need to also understand, and this is something that many times is overlooked. As you begin in this business and as you get into this, when your name becomes associated to the property, whether it's correctly or incorrectly associated to the property, you pick up obligations as the lender. And you want to know what you're going to be picking up by virtue of acquiring the property that even the seller may not have been aware they're doing. We've had lots of problems in areas of this country where people have bought distressed properties that unfortunately were knocked down very quickly after they bought them because they were so far gone. The cities came in and said, no, they're knocking them down. So you wind up with nothing other than a plot of land. So again, you really need to be aware, and I'm not trying to scare anybody, but again, it's a matter of risk. You're taking money that you've worked very hard to acquire to then do something further with it. You're not gambling with it. You're using your cash as an investment to further your prosperity, not take a hit because you got submarined by something you didn't realize.
Yeah.
And it unfortunately, some mistakes can be very, very costly.
Potentially a lot, yes.
Yeah.
So a couple of comments here in their chat. Chandor's asking if it was Bear Stearns. I remember it is actually Enhanced Mortgage. That's who I was looking at this paper from, and they just had nothing, no collateral documents, no pay history, no nothing. So it's
Well,
just,
GMEC will do that as well. If you're buying product that came from
Really?
GMEC, you can have an issue.
okay. And then Matt Kelly, this is excellent. He's asking for us to explain the importance of possessing and obtaining the origination file, loan application, the complete pay history as they're needed in judicial foreclosures and collections. Also for compliance purposes when selling to lenders who may securitize the debt. So just that importance of just copies are great, and we get the copies when we look at a file before we purchase, but the actual paper still matters. That's a big deal, and you've got to have that actual collateral file. Bar none, really.
Yeah,
Like,
I think
you just have
also,
to have
I think
it.
what, Yeah, having the original file, you're not going to see the original file when you go to buy that loan or when you do due diligence. It's when you get the physical file, you need to make sure it's wet ink, like not a copy.
Right.
Literally, the copy was signed. So I think what Matt was also doing is, what is your thoughts on making sure you have the loan application, having the complete pay history for a couple of reasons. BK court may require things like that, but also judicial when you're going foreclosure. Speak a little bit about making sure you have those papers. For people like us, so typically we don't need the loan application, right? As small investors, but if you're going to sell to a fund who does securitization, that's required collateral.
There again, I think that speaks to the volume that you own in order to transfer product. You're in buyers. If you're looking to sell loans, if you're buying to turn around and flip, you need to understand very quickly what your end users are going to require. And more importantly, you need to understand whether or not that will be physically available before you even start to look at product. Because a lot of the product that you're looking at that's seasoned is more than likely not going to have all the documentation that they need. So you need to therefore be even more diligent in looking at what you're getting if you're buying that with that as a goal to sell. It's a very complicated situation to sell, to put them into the mortgage backs or that without all the documentation. And they don't normally buy 1 or 2 loans from people and then collect them.
Right. And then Nico's got a question here. This is kind of a specific situation he's got. He says he's got a second note in Maryland and one of the assignments is lost. He has a lost assignment affidavit, but the county is not willing to record a lost assignment,
Correct.
assignment affidavit. Is that something that you can
Well,
help with?
Does he have a copy of what was to be recorded? Or does he not even have a copy of what was to be recorded?
Oh, we'll see if he responds
We'll
here.
see,
That's
yeah.
a good question.
I know he's listening. So that's the biggest problem. A lot of times we'll get lost, no affidavits and whatnot. And those, depending on the county and depending on the state, can or may not be able to be held, right? PA, you can't even foreclose with something like that at times. So
Well, I think
he
there's a
does.
difference between a document being unrecorded in a copy format, or you don't even have a copy of what was to be recorded.
Okay.
Because if you have the ability to rephrase your lost note affidavit or your lost assignment affidavit to the extent that you can say, I have a copy of what was to be recorded, and you put all of that together, you can work with your title company
Okay.
if you're foreclosing. You're not just making up something that you think happened. You have not got the original, but you have what was to be recorded. And if it's complete, you need to make sure, though, that what you have meets what you think it does. It has to say what on the assignment, that it's going from A to B. And again, I'd be more than happy to have him send it to me and look at it and tell him, here's how
Nico,
I would rephrase my lost assignment affidavit.
Nico, if you didn't do that, where you didn't show the county the original copy, the copy of the original, as well as the lost note affidavit, try that. You know, you can definitely try that. And if not, then reach out to Casey. I'm sure he'll walk you through the process.
Be sure his lost assignment is specifically referring to the fact that they have a copy of what was to be recorded and they are unable to obtain the original to be recorded.
Gotcha.
You have to lead them to understand why you're having them. You're not just taking having them take a guess that this is here.
Yeah.
He will send it to you, he said. Awesome.
Okay.
Wow.
Good.
Awesome information. It's amazing that this world of just collateral file, which most investors kind of skip over, they focus more on the actual investment itself, don't realize the leverage that this collateral file has over you. And you may be buying nothing, right? If you don't know what you're doing.
Well, you'll buy less than what you thought.
It's true. But at the same time, there are people, you know, like you guys out there that can help you through that process and, you know, understand the fact that you may have bought less than what you bought, but here's how we can get you to a full level where you could buy a loan that may have less and discount it a lot, get Casey to step in. Now it's fully worth everything. You can sell it to one of us for more money.
Yeah.
It can happen, right?
Right. And again, we do it both sides, just so that people understand. We have clients that have us clean it up and make sure that it's all ready to go. Or we have clients that say, okay, we're going to sell this based upon what we know we can represent wholly, and we'll take a cut or a haircut in pricing because we don't want to go through the process of doing it, but we sell it to somebody who knows up front what they're getting, and we negotiate a much better price.
Yeah, and when I'm purchasing, it makes me so much more comfortable when I ask for the collateral and I'm CC'd on an email that is going to Casey Wilson and says, hey, can you guys send Nathan the collateral? Oh, excellent. I know we're in good hands then. And so that makes me feel a lot more comfortable. And
again, it gets back to what you guys said in the very beginning, that you heard I wasn't taking business at different times. I don't want to be in a position where I'm not a positive person in someone's relationship with the industry. I don't do business that way. And if I feel that we're going to have a compatible relationship, that's great. If I don't, unfortunately, there's not a lot of money to be made if you wind up bouncing around all over the place.
Sure.
And it's not fair to the buyer, and it's not fair to the seller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's great.
Well, guys, if you have any additional questions, feel free to put it in the post and I'll answer it. But we're going to start wrapping up soon. So please make sure you ask that question before we tie up. So
again, I'm going to ask, I've asked many of our guests.
Yes.
And with your experience and just the time that you've been in the industry, do you have a crystal ball projection here? Are we in looking at more non-performing coming up, or is that maybe too much hype from a year ago? Or what do you think?
I think debt is a serious problem in this country right now, whether it's in this arena or not. I think people as a whole do not feel any obligation to pay back the debts that they incur.
Mm-hmm.
So my advice to people is, if you're going to be in this business, you better make real sure that you understand the collateral you get eventually when the payments are not received. And I've had clients, and I tell this story. One of my first clients was a guy that came to me with 25 loans and said, I got these 25 loans, Casey, and they say you'll help me, and we got to get through them. And this guy took his 25 loans, and through pain and suffering, we got them all foreclosed upon. However, he didn't want the money back. He didn't want that. And he now has 25 pieces of real estate that return him a very nice standard of living. And so he took what he didn't think he was going to get and made something out of it, because he's got now the tangible. But you have to be prepared to understand how and what you get for your debt that you're buying, because that's a problem. The courts are not as stringent as they used to be, but you have to be prepared to be proactive as the owner of the debt to make the court go up and down when they're looking at your file and your case, going yes, 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 not go, huh, or what, or wait a minute. I use the story. When the judge is looking at your stuff, you want his head up and down. You don't want him to say, well, wait a minute, what about this or what about that? You want every question answered. So everything should be discussed before it goes to the court, before you even file, because the last thing you want to do is get in a terrible relationship.
Right.
You don't want to be on the defense. If you're on the defense, you got a huge problem.
Excellent.
But I think again, if you're realistic in what you're doing, you'll do very well.
Yeah.
And you might be
so
a
debt is
landlord.
good. Debt is good from our side, right? You know, I'm the same with you. My wife and I have been on a pledge to get out of debt for, because she had a lot of student loan debt that we got into, and mortgages and stuff like that. But debt in general in this society is out of control for years. car debt, college debt, the whole works. And I agree with you, is understanding how to leverage yourself to be in a spot to take advantage of that situation, because you're right, it ain't going away. Right.
Right.
Yeah. College loans is another thing that people are talking about, where I know for years you couldn't buy them, and then they're starting to be sellable now, which is interesting. Commercial, everything else, but debt in general is a huge. Everyone tried leveraging everything. So
Well, and again, it's a simple fact. Somebody owes you money, and what do you get for collateral? If
Yeah.
you get their signature, you don't have something you can repossess.
Yeah,
If you get something, you want to make sure what you get. I have clients that do car loans, and they do very high interest car loans, and every one of the loans they make, the tracker goes on the car because they want to know where that car is every single month. There are certain things they make perfectly clear. I'm offsetting my risk of you being a high credit risk by putting this on your car so I don't lose it. Or I'm giving you a loan against your house, but I need to have you understand, I'm going to be monitoring that you're taking care of it and the taxes are paid and this and that. If you're not, I'm going to start my plan to make sure I don't lose my investment.
Excellent.
I love it. I love it because it's a good different perspective of what's going on. Because it's bigger picture. It's awesome.
Correct.
Awesome. Well,
Very good.
everyone, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Nathan, Casey, I appreciate you coming on here and spend an hour on a Friday afternoon. Hopefully it's nice where you're at. We're dealing with some storms over here in Jersey. But I appreciate your knowledge, your experience, and your just wealth of, being willing to share with everyone. I appreciate it.
And I'd like to make sure your audience understands. Your first time coming to us, don't feel that you're going to get charged. We're going to talk to you and give you our advice. And then, the first time introducing yourselves to us, we're not like attorneys and started up. We want to make you happy and see what you've got.
Yeah.
We like puzzles. If you don't like puzzles, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah, and my testimonial is you guys have been absolutely fantastic. I've never had any issue at all. It's always been a very good
right. And
experience.
Daniel was on the call, so Daniel knows that the partnership works. Daniel's success rate is very good when Daniel gets something that's given to him to go through.
Yeah,
it works. It's a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And those who don't know, he's an attorney that does a lot of collateral help with investors and whatnot, and owns his own stuff as well. I did put it in the form inside the Facebook Live comment box. If you want to reach out to him, fill the form out, and we'll share you his bio as well as his contact information. So I appreciate it. And
all right.
Again, have a great weekend, everybody.
Yes.
And take care.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invite.